Hi, I'm Zach Childs, and welcome to the Truetone Lounge. Today, our guest is Guthrie Trapp.
How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Guthrie has distinguished himself in a town full of great guitar players. He's played with big names like Garth Brooks and Dolly Parton and such, but then he's also played with virtuoso players like Jerry Douglas and Sam Bush. He has a new album coming out called Life After Dark. And he's, works, playing sessions. He's been touring with John Oates recently with an all-star band. He has teaching that you do,
Right.
both online and Skype, and you have a show that you do called Trapped Above Ground.
Right.
And we're just happy to have you on the show today.
Thanks, man. I'm thrilled to be here, and we're not going to tell anybody what time it is, are we?
No.
It's really 10 o'clock at night.
It's 10 o'clock. It's late. It's late. So Guthrie, what drew you to music?
Well, I was very lucky growing up on the Gulf Coast. My mom and dad, who are not musicians, but they're discerning music listeners, and they're aficionados of music. My dad's youngest brother, my uncle, I'm an only child, so I looked up to him like an older brother, and I admired him, a super talented guy. He was one of those guys that was just super cool. Anything he did, he was good at. Sailing, and anything he did, he was the best at it. He was also a self-taught musician, so growing up around my uncle, playing a lot of different instruments, laying around, listening to records that he had and my mom and dad had, and going back to my folks, they listened to a ton of bluegrass, folk music, new acoustic music, jazz, blues, some rock and roll, but I wasn't raised on Led Zeppelin and the Beatles, no top 40 radio. We'd go to music festivals, and I'd go to these parties that our friends would have that all revolved around music. And I never had a babysitter. Maybe I remember once or twice that I ever had a babysitter, but my parents took me with them everywhere. And a lot of this stuff revolved around music. So my theory is that if you're born into that kind of environment, then the music is getting into your blood, before you even are able to pick up an instrument. So the sounds and the feels of music are you're kind of like picking it up, before you're even born, and so when you're exposed to that much of it, by the time you are old enough to pick up an instrument, you're kind of already in you, And I know a lot of the guys that I really love to listen to have kind of similar stories, So that's how I got into it. That's that's the abbreviated version, but a very cool family that I come from, and I've just got great parents, and they had really good taste in music, And my uncle was the conduit too to having him being a self-taught musician and having all these instruments laying around, and when his band would rehearse, a lot of times I'd be there, and when they'd take a break, I'd pick up a guitar and turn it up and start noodling around. The first instrument that I picked up was the harmonica, and I'd noodle around on the harmonica, and could play a little blues harmonica, whatever. I was like 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old, and then I'd play with my uncle and his buddies, and then, like I said, when they'd take a break, I'd pick up one of their guitars and start playing the same kind of blues licks, the pentatonic blues scale and stuff like that I didn't know what it was, but I was finding those notes on the guitar, and way before anybody told me that, like, hey man, you need to learn some chords, So, but yeah, that's kind of how I got into it, Yeah.
Then you progressed musically, and you started playing in bands in the kind of the Floribama area. And if people aren't familiar with that, that's an area that's kind of a touristy and somewhat of a party area. People go there to the beach. People go there to party and
very much so
have a good time. And so you were entertaining tourists and locals and such. So what made you get to the point to where you wanted to move to Nashville?
When I was about 12, I joined this local band down there that was playing bluegrass, and we played every Wednesday night. We did some festivals and blah, blah, and then that progressed into playing with some different people. And it is kind of a long story that I won't get into all those details, but I quit school. I quit school 2 weeks into the 10th grade and never went back because I was already playing and making money. And as your bills, kind of the first bills that you have to pay on your own, like maybe your car insurance and stuff like that, I was able to pay from playing, and then that just kind of evolved into making a living playing music. But Playing on the Gulf Coast, yeah, we did. We played a lot at the Floribama. We played a lot at Seville Quarter and a bunch of the different places in Pensacola Beach. And there was also this really cool thing at the Floribama, which was kind of like a little bit like Lower Broadway, where they had songwriters and bands and stuff playing, but they would start music at like 11 o'clock and go till 3 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
So there were a lot of opportunities.
There was a lot of opportunities to go play. My aunt was the accountant and bookkeeper and everything for the Floribama for 35 years, so we knew the owner really well. He would let me come out there when I was 12 and 13 and sit in with these bands. And some of the guys would be so drunk by 4 o'clock in the afternoon that I'd go out there and they'd hand me their guitar and I'd finish their sets for them.
Yeah.
You know, because they've already had, 13 drinks.
Right, because people have been buying them around.
Well, yeah, and they were just alcoholics. I mean, you're talking about the last great roadhouse in America. I mean, this place was crazy, but an unparalleled education for being able to grow up playing in clubs. I mean, these guys taught me how to turn up. They taught me how to entertain a crowd of people that were if you weren't any good, they're going to throw stuff at you, you know? And so played a lot of gigs down there, 7 nights a week and twice on Sunday. And then, that just went on for years and years and years. And when I was about 20 and 21, I kind of was like, man, I've got to find a way to get out of here. This is going to kill me.
Because part of it is you had kind of peaked already as far as the area.
As far as
so
that area, I was done.
Yeah,
we were with that area down there, the Gulf Coast. I was done. There was a songwriters festival down there that they still have called the Frank Brown International Songwriters Festival. And all these songwriters would come down from Nashville and spend 2 or 3 weeks on the Gulf Coast playing at all these different venues. So back when it was really cool, before it got too fragmented and everything revolved around the main bar and at the Bama and then a couple little venues right around Perdido Key, this was the late 90s. So these guys were like Hank Cochran, Red Lane, Mickey Newberry, all these guys would come down there, these legends. And
these are very important songwriters.
Very important songwriters. Mickey Newberry wrote American Trilogy for Elvis and like all these incredible songs. And at that point in his life, he was on an oxygen tank. And he was, I remember we went over to the beach house because these guys would finish up playing. The festival would be over at like 2:30 or 3 in the morning, and then everybody would go to the beach house and play till 8 or 9 in the morning. We'd watch the sun come up and everybody's passing the guitar around. I remember one night Mickey Newberry was sitting at the end of this table with about 13 or 14 people around this giant table, and he was smoking a cigarette, drinking tequila out of a pint glass, and he's hooked up to an oxygen tank. And I was like, man, this is crazy shit. So around that time, getting back to the story, around 2021, I was like, this has got to end. And with my local band, we were going up to Louisville and playing a bunch. We had this connection at this club in Louisville, and we were coming up there and playing a bunch. And I met this girl up there, and I ended up moving up to Louisville for a year and hanging out with her. And then that next year, I moved down to Nashville. Got a tiny apartment on Music Row. I lived for 2 years, then moved to 12 South for 8 years, then moved to Berry Hill for 6 years, and now I'm in East Nashville. I've been there for about 10 months, so I've been around town a little bit.
So you moved to Nashville, and every successful player, I should say, has this moment where the door busts open. So what was your moment when you moved to Nashville? And of course, you're struggling. You don't really know anyone yet. But what was that moment that busted things open for you and everything kind of started from there?
Yeah. So, this local music store in Pensacola, I would go there, and I heard this music playing in there one day, and it was Johnny Highland with Don Kelley, and they had got a CD from being at the NAMM show. And so I heard this band, and I was like, who is this? So he goes, man, if you ever get to Nashville, you got to go check this band out at Roberts. And so when I came to town, the only thing I knew to do was go down and check this band out at Roberts. And so I would go down there, and of course they played Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night from 6 to 10, and Don's been down there. He's still down there. And so I would go down there, meet the band, talk to Don, I'd go down there. It seemed like every night I was down there. I'd drink beer, stand in the doorway, and listen to Johnny and watch, the band. And so I told Don, I said, hey man, look, I said, I just moved up here from the Gulf Coast. I had a band on the Gulf. We played a bunch of this similar kind of music, a lot of blues and swing and country and stuff. And then I said, look, if Johnny ever can't make this gig, I said, I'd love to come down and sub. Feel free to, try me, And so he never did. He never let me sit in. He never let me play with the band or anything like that. So one of these songwriters from the Gulf that knew Don, we ran into each other on the sidewalk one night. I was talking to Don on the sidewalk, and this guy, Joe's son, walks up. And he goes, Don, you got to get this guy to sit in sometime. And so Don finally, then, this was like after 2 or 3 months of going down there, Don goes, okay, man, next Sunday, come bring your guitar, and we'll get you up to play like a couple tunes, And I did, and then I sat in another couple times. Kenny Vaughn was down there one night or something, and I ended up playing with him and sitting in and everything. And then so Don goes, he goes, hey, man, Johnny's leaving this gig. He goes, if you want this gig, you can have it. It's yours. I said, of course, great, So then I started playing with Don, and then about a year later, I think Kenny and John Randall, who now we have a band together and all this stuff, but I think they told Patty Loveless to come down there and check me out. So she came down, and I ended up, auditioning with her with like 1 or 2 other guys, and I ended up getting that gig and toured with her. And then when I wasn't playing with her, I'd come back to Nashville and play with Don.
Yeah.
And then from that, I worked with Don for 4 years down there. The first 4 years I was here, I worked with him. And then, but in the middle of that 4 years, I started working with Patty and then working with Jerry. So
Jerry Douglas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was a good couple gigs that I had within the first 4 years of living here. So
that's fantastic.
Super lucky.
So Don Kelley kind of has a reputation of kind of like being like the country John Mayall, where he gets these players and he and that are great. And so what obviously you came up from the Gulf Coast and you came up here and you started playing with Don.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from playing with Don? What did he teach you, or just playing in that environment?
Well, the cool thing about that gig was the fact, the great thing about it and the awful thing about it was you're playing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 6 to 10, 4 hours a night, 4 days a week for 4 years. I did that gig. Yeah. So my chops were blazing down there because all those songs that he plays fast are way too fast. Mm-hmm. But soloing and being the only instrument in that band, it's just 2 guitars, bass, and drums. So I took all the fills, took 98% of all the solos. Don would play a little bit here and there, but not much. So I was filling and soloing on everything all night long. And this was like blues songs, ballads, country shuffles, train beats, all kinds of different stuff. So for me, it was great because the band I had on the Gulf Coast, we were kind of similar. It was 2 guitars, bass, and drums. We were playing train beats, swing and blues and jazz stuff. We were playing original music that was very roots oriented, a lot of blues, and then some country stuff. I mean, some train beat kind of country stuff. And so I was kind of already prepped in a way to play with Don. That's when I went down there and heard him. I told Don, I was like, man, I can play this gig. I know I can play this gig. And I didn't tell him that, but I was kind of like, hey man, I had a band on the Gulf that was very similar to this, so I just knew it would be a good fit. And Don loved me. I will say this because he's told me this about 10 different times, but he said that I was his favorite guitar player in that band, and I'm going to step out on a limb and say that and I know why. It's because Don loves the blues, and if he could play the blues for a living, that's what he would be doing. And I love the blues also. And so when I went down there to sit in with him, I didn't take a Telecaster. I brought some sort of hollow body. I think it might have been an old Guild or something. And I got up and played that guitar, and I think he liked that. He liked the fact that I didn't bring a Tele and have a compressor turned all the way up or anything like that. I took a funky hollow body down there and played some blues songs. And I think he really liked that, So, but anyway, that gig was a really great springboard. And that gig is like, man, Brent Mason, Johnny, JD, Red Volkart. I mean, there's a bunch of other guys that have played in that gig that are great guitar players too. guys from in town, Porter, McClister, people that really don't think about as much as those guys like Brent. But the thing about that gig is it kind of, as soon as you are the guy on that stage down on Broadway, and this was more kind of, I think this is more, it was kind of more relevant back when I was doing it, when it was the late or early 2000s. Because now Broadway has changed so much. There are so many people down there that it's just gotten kind of diluted. But down there, when I was back down there, there was still kind of a community of all the players kind of knew each other. And if you're playing with Don, you're kind of like the new Billy the Kid on the street. You're the new gunslinger on the street. It immediately gives you this street cred,
Yeah.
And for good reason, I guess. I mean, the guys that can play in that band are guys that have chops to be able to play those tempos and all those different styles, right? So there's a little bit of truth to it, and then there's a little bit of hype to it too. So, but why not?
So we've interviewed two other guys, Brent Mason and J.D. Sima, that were in the Don Kelley Band.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what they. Did you talk to them about it?
Yes, I did, and one of the things that was interesting was
I like to always give Don credit. You know,
Yes.
and a lot of guys that have been through that band. I think they don't. I like to go back and always give credit to people that were influential in your career. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a whole list of people I could name. So,
funnily enough, JD felt like that you were kind of like the most perfect guitar player for that gig.
oh man, that's nice of him to say that.
And but the question I was going to ask you is. With both of them, they both had some interesting stories about people that would come to watch them, and that could be intimidating. Brent talked about George Benson coming and seeing him play, and then JD talked about
Chet.
And Chet and Reggie Young coming to sitting right up front in front of JD. So what was just an interesting night, or some night that was just fun because someone that was intimidating the crap out of you.
Okay, I'll tell you exactly that moment. And those guys are right. There's been a ton of people that have come in through the years into that bar room. And the one that I remember the most, and this was not long after I joined that band, Paul Franklin and Brent came in together, and they both sat together and sat right in front of me at this table. And I just looked at Don, and I was like, oh, God. I was you got to be kidding me,
Did
man.
they cross their arms and give you that kind of like,
pretty
impress
much?
me?
I mean, they might as well have been. Yeah. But now, it's funny to look back on those moments because now we just got done doing this John Oates tour where Paul was out with us for two of those shows, L.A. at the Troubadour and then the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco. And we were traveling together and hanging, and he's on my record with Vince Gill playing the country shuffle that we did on there. And now we're buddies, and of course, I've got the utmost respect for him, and he has probably, he respects me as a player and a guy. We've had some great conversations and all that kind of stuff. But so that was the night that I remember the most specifically. Jerry Douglas coming in kind of rattled me a little bit too. He came in with a couple of the current band members back then, and Jerry's a big guy too, man. He's an intimidating cat no matter what he's doing, and so that rattled me a little bit. Patty a little bit too, but not so much because she's not a player. But the Paul Franklin and Brent sitting together, man, that was like I was like, oh my God, man,
Front row.
this is like okay, here you go, But what are you gonna do? I mean, you're especially now. I don't get rattled around, anybody really because at this point we have done all those things. We've had a lot of experience. We've met a lot of these people. A lot of them are our friends, and we do have mutual respect for each other. So, at this point, we're all comfortable enough to go, hey, man, this is what I do. If you don't like it, that's fine. But we know enough people do to where we're comfortable with ourselves, and we enjoy. I enjoy sitting down and playing the guitar at my house and just trying to come up with something soulful to play, and if you're happy doing that, then you shouldn't be worried about anybody else, But back then, we're all freaked out,
Yeah. Guthrie, let's talk about the new album. It's called Life After Dark, and I was very impressed with one. There's just great playing all over it.
Thank you.
Two, your versatility is just amazing. The styles that you cover, covering jazz and bluegrass, kind of newgrass and country and blues and
Thanks,
and
man.
gospel. I just loved the diversity of it, and the guest vocals are fantastic.
Thanks.
Songs choice, tones, everything on it.
Thank you, man.
Great job.
Appreciate it. Yeah, well, the thing about this one is the first record I did in 2012 is all instrumental. I'm not playing any acoustic guitar or mandolin on it at all. And it kind of just, I don't really, I think I have a theory about music, and it's like, I think music should be taken very seriously, but it shouldn't be overthought, right? Because a lot of times it sounds like it, and we don't want to, we're bored hearing that kind of stuff. So, I go in, if I have a couple ideas of songs that are fleshed out, great. If not, we'll finish them in the studio, or else some of the stuff on the first record was just, I think we went in and cut a couple of those things kind of live, It's all live, but we kind of did like a couple of those were just things that we came up with in the studio. So with the second record, I wanted to have some vocal guests on there. The first record I didn't want to really have any guests on there, because I wanted to kind of stand alone as the first one out of the chute. And then with this one, I felt more comfortable having some guests on there, but I didn't want to have any guest guitar players because I don't know. There's so many records out there with guitar players that have a bunch of guest guitar players on there. And I thought, why have a guitar record with a bunch of guest guitar players? Why not have other instruments, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's just a marketing thing and you want to have a bunch of famous guitar players on there. So like Vince Gill agreed to be on the record, but he's not playing any guitar. It would have been fine and great, of course, if he did. I didn't ask him not to play the guitar. And I even said, hey, Vince, would you be willing to play some guitar and sing this song? And he said, yeah, I'll do whatever you want on there, which, of course, I was blown away when I got that voicemail back. But so he's singing on there. Paul Franklin's playing pedal steel. I'm playing all the electric guitars. And then I've got Sam Bush is playing some mandolin. Jeff Coffin's playing saxophone. Stuart Duncan's on there. A bunch of great rhythm sections. Glenn Worf, Michael Rhodes, Steve Mackey, Jerry Navarro playing bass. A couple different drummers, Greg Morrow, Fred Eltringham, Pete Abbott. And then a bunch of guest vocalists. Charlie Worsham's on there singing an old country song by Don Gibson. Jimmy Hall's doing some old Paul Butterfield songs that I grew up listening to. And part of this record, too, is going back and paying homage to a lot of my influence as a kid, which, like I said, I really didn't get to dive in a whole lot into those on the first record. So played some acoustic guitar, played some mandolin, did a Hank Williams song that called I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry with Bekka Bramlett. We did a really kind of vibey version of that. And my mom is a huge Hank Williams fan, so I did that for her. I always dedicate these recordings to my mom and dad because without them I wouldn't be here first and foremost, and I wouldn't have the musical upbringing that I had if it wasn't for them. So, and then, just like I said, kind of paying tribute to all those influences and getting a chance to kind of, after doing the first one and thinking about doing the second one, that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't overthink it. I knew, I think a lot of, I'd kind of self-produced these records, and it's just really, if you find good songs and you know the guys to call for those songs, I know something good's going to happen in there, So just get your friends together and get the right guys on the right songs, and something great's going to happen,
Yeah.
So I don't even worry about that part. It's like I would never tell those guys what to play,
That's fantastic.
And that's what you get out of it,
Yeah.
You just get some, you get, that's how the exciting stuff in music happens to me,
Yeah.
So.
And again, it's being released, and then they can get it off. They can order it off your website. They can go to GuthrieTrapp.com, and they can either get the downloaded or the physical version of the CD of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be all out on all the digital outlets, and then of course, if you want to support me and my lifestyle, you can always buy it on my website, which would be great. But of course, you can stream it if you want. Yeah.
Buck Dancer's Choice.
Yeah.
It seemed to kind of have three different movements in it. It's kind of like you had the kind of Chet-ish kind of in the beginning, and then kind of got a little more kind of islandy, and then at the end got a touch of fusion on it. Is that all the Telecaster? Or?
Yeah, that was a lot of the guitar I played on that record. I don't even own that guitar anymore. I bought this guitar. The guitar that I've been playing for 14 years, that Floyd Telly, I had to get it refretted. And when I did, something changed in that guitar, and I'm trying to resurrect it, but I kind of put it away. Actually, it's at Glazer's right now. It's been there for a while to try to get another refret. So I ended up playing this other Telly, and I used a bunch of stuff that I never used. I mean, everybody knows I use blackface Fenders 99% of the time. I ended up using this Bogner Goldfinger on that record. I mean, it just beat out almost everything else tone-wise. It's their kind of vintage style amp, and 212 open back cabinet, little Bogner Goldfinger was killing it. Really nice reverb and stuff. So that song, I grew up playing that song with my uncle. I heard the Taj Mahal version first. And so we kind of, it was kind of based on that, and then the melody is kind of a little finger picking thing, and then the way the rhythm developed was Steve and Pete. It kind of has a little bit of an African vibe to it. So that was kind of the rhythm section. Steve's doing those kind of slides on the bass, which is really cool, and then the solo section kind of goes into a little bit more of the Latin feel or whatever, and then at the end. That kind of happened spontaneously where we just played those two chords, which I think is just C and F, or it could be F over G or something. But and then just kind of that we were kind of looking at each other, and I was kind of like, "Please don't stop, because this is cool," and we kept it rolling. And then that's what happened. I got Jimmy once I realized that kind of outro was going to go on for a little bit. I got Jimmy Wallace to come in and overdub that really nice B3 stuff that he's doing under there. So. That's one of my favorite tracks on the song because it was kind of very spontaneous.
Yeah. Oh Lonesome Me, the great old Don Gibson tune.
Right, yeah.
Has a great kind of retro sound, and you have the accordion on there.
Jeff Taylor from the Time Jumpers,
yes, fantastic.
Yeah, thanks.
Sounds kind of like, was that a Gretsch, or
okay,
what were you playing on there?
So on that song, I was playing my Telly, but Charlie Worsham takes the first solo.
Okay.
And he's playing an acoustic guitar into an amp.
Okay.
With might even be a sound hole pickup.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure. Don't quote me on that. But Charlie's taking the first solo. I'm taking the second solo, which is not noted on the CD.
Okay.
It's not noted on the notes, but that's what's going on that one.
That's why I kind of thought is that a Gretsch, but that makes sense being acoustic with a sound hole pickup.
Yeah. And that song's cool because I'll say something real quick about that. It's a fun song.
Yeah.
But if you listen to it, the bass, if you listen to the original, and I think Michael stayed pretty true to the original with his touch and feel, of course, but it's got kind of a flip-flop bass line to where when it goes to the 5 chord, it's almost playing a 2, 5 or something like that. Listen to the bass line because it's really odd.
Yeah.
You don't notice it going by if you're not listening to it, but as soon as you listen to it, you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of it's a very unique. It might have been Bob Moore on that original track.
Commodity kind of has almost Eric Johnson-y kind of feel to it. I'm assuming that's Telly, like with the Nobles or something like that, or was that Amp Drive?
I think it was this guitar.
Okay, the 335.
And yeah, it might have been a really light overdrive, and then if I go to a solo, I'll either hit another pedal to gain it up a little bit, or I'll reach down with my foot and turn the gain up as I'm going. But I think that was this guitar, and that song just came out of a little. It kind of came out of like just messing around with a little chord melody, kind of like this. I don't know if you can hear that. So it's just like everything I play is out of the chord shape. So that was just something I came up with one day. I just thought, well, that's cool, and then I'll do another part. And if I come up with a part of something that I think's worthy of being a song, then I'll try to work out a B part, and then maybe a solo section, and then just kind of try to arrange something that would be interesting for me to listen to. Hopefully,
Yeah. Getting to the diversity of the, just kind of the eclectic nature of the album, the Shag Rug Burn almost sounds like something that would have been like 60s organ trio kind of thing.
Yeah, and kind of is. I mean, that lick, too, I'll just demonstrate real quick. So that lick, it's almost like a 3-octave lick. So it's based around the major third in A. Let's see. So you're doing, right? So that lick, like I said, it's like those 3 octaves. So it's like, so it's just based around that lick. And then into the song. But so that, just having a little lick like that can turn into a song, like you said, kind of a little bit of a boogaloo groove, right?
Yeah.
Which is very fun to solo over.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's a great groove. Who played organ on that?
That was Charles Treadway.
Oh yes.
Yeah. From plays with Jack Pearson now, and also
Charles Walker.
And Wig Walker. Yeah, with Charles and Wig Walker. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then, probably one of my favorite songs on the album is the gospel tune with Danny Flowers.
Yeah.
And the McCrary Sisters, and great slide playing on that.
Oh, thanks,
and
man.
just a great track.
Appreciate it. Yeah, that was very fun. And again, I knew if we did that version of that song, I just kind of went crazy, and I was like, man, let's go full gospel. So all 4 McCrary sisters, Danny Flowers and Bekka singing on there too.
Right.
And they all kind of have their solo, spots that they sing a verse. And then I knew with that group that it would be really, really great. And then having Fred Eltringham and Glenn Worf and Kevin McKendry on keys, and then I'm playing my old Teisco slide, which I don't play. I'm not a slide guitar player by any means at all, but it's fun to pull out every once in a while. If it's in drop D or not drop, but open D or open G, I can get around on a little bit. But I'm not a slide guitar player, but I did play some slide on this record.
It was very nice.
Yeah, thanks.
So it was funny listening to Got My Mojo Working, the old Muddy Waters tune.
Yeah.
That almost seemed like like it could have been a Don Kelley tune. Is that a song that you played with Don Kelley? Because you kind of get into this telly, kind of burning thing over the changes.
Yeah, I didn't play that with Don, but we used to play that in my band on the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
And we just always did it. I mean, even if you listen to the original, I mean, those worlds are crossing so closely there, and it's a fun tune. I mean, why not chicken pick over it? It kind of works. So, in a way, I don't want to say that, by no means would I try to make that song country at all, because it's so badass the way it is.
With Jimmy Hall singing.
Oh God,
I know,
right? Yeah, and he's one of my favorite singers in the world, and tours with Jeff Beck too, which was very awesome. And so Jimmy's one of my favorites, and he's from kind of my area too. He's from not too far down the road on the Gulf Coast, and just really cool. But yeah, I don't know what to say about the fact that I kind of am chicken picking over the top of that song, but it just seems like the right thing to do,
It works. It was funny. And interviewing Reggie Young and talking about the Memphis scene.
Yeah.
It was just the whole Delta blues and country music. It was such a marriage, especially there.
Yeah.
But it was shocking to me to find out that he was telling me the blacks were listening to country music. They listened to the Grand Ole Opry, and they listened to those things, and that was mixing with Delta blues, and that's what created that music.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that's right on. I mean, the whole thing about the music that came out of the South, I think it is. I think those things are very related. I mean, somebody asked me the other day, like, hey, how do you look at how bluegrass and country and blues and all this stuff is related? And it's a hard question to articulate the answer to, but they're very related. I mean, to me, it's just it's a wash of all that stuff, and those styles on the guitar kind of go seamlessly together. I mean, you could get into specifics of how it all works as far as like using the the blues scale in country music. It's just how you attack it. If you're playing a blues song, I'm probably going to play single note and use my pick. And if I'm playing country, I'm probably going to, be doing like a hybrid style. But it's just the way you attack the guitar. To me, that's what separates it. It's not. It's all the same to me. I even look at a lot of and we're talking like real country music. What I consider real country music. Music from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even some of the 80s. I mean, Hank Jr. had some great hardcore country stuff that he recorded in the 80s and 90s. But even some of that stuff is like, to me, it's almost funky. Like Jerry Reed and some of that Merle Haggard stuff. I mean, in Waylon, those Waylon halftime grooves, it's funky, man.
Yeah.
And it's very bluesy. If you listen to all those Merle Haggard records where Ralph Mooney and those guys are playing, I mean, it's all blues licks. It's blues licks, And unless it's something that has, that's in a very, major, sound, then of course, that's going to determine it all. All this stuff really, it all comes down to what song you're playing. So that's kind of the deal. But that's how I look at it.
Also on the album, there's some kind of newgrass acoustic things where you're playing with Stuart Duncan and Sam Bush, and and then also you feature your mandolin playing. What kind of acoustic were you using on the record?
I used quite a few different ones. The one, my favorite is my 1955 Gibson J50, which is just a really good sounding acoustic guitar. It records very well. Let the strings get a little slightly dead, and which works on Gibsons better than Martins. But that guitar just records really, really well. I used a little Collings OM prototype that I have from them. I used that on I think I used that on that Leaper's Fork tune, and then there was a rhythm part I played a Martin that I think John Randall had over there that was just kind of laying around. And I grabbed that and used for a part. But, yeah, I think those three.
Yeah.